So thank you for doing this. Where and when were you born?
So I was born in Ontario, Canada in 1989 in February.
Do you say oot and a boot and serviette and what else do
Um,
Canadians say?
no, I don't think I do. Some people maybe notice it, but I don't. Yeah, there's definitely a Canadian accent, but not all of us have it.
It's similar to like the northern Midwestern states. They do some of the same things with the
Yeah.
O sound. So I think of Aquarians as being really forward looking, visionary, principled. Does that apply to you, would you say, or not?
I I think so. I'm a dreamer, and so yeah, I definitely I think so. Yeah.
And what other words would you use to describe yourself besides a dreamer?
Um, Nerdy, artsy, creative, I guess,
Mm-hmm.
sciencey.
Okay.
But
What
it
what
means
did
both the arts and the sciences.
what did you study in university?
um, I have not actually finished university. I would like to study environmental sciences. So that's my hope.
And what have you been doing in between to make money and feed yourself?
I work on a lot of farms. We used to have a family owned business, so I was working in that for a while. And during Corona, I'm not working. So a lot of places in my town have gone out of business. A lot of the
Mm.
locally owned businesses are closed now. So so we'll figure it out. But
And where are the most outstanding universities with environmental science that you know of?
oh, I have no idea. um, Toronto's usually the go-to for my region.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah. Um, so, how did you get interested in and aware of the climate crisis, and what made you decide not to just to be informed, but to do something about it?
so that's sort of a long story.
That's
Um,
fine.
I've been a lifelong lover of nature and a lifelong environmentalist. My whole life, I felt very close to the woods and the outdoors, and close to cultures that are also close to the land. Um, I heard about climate change in grade 10 when I was back in 2004 ish. And um, I grew up with like a lot of awareness of like Hurricane Katrina and a lot of like crazy climate disasters that were increasing. And I would see a lot of like politicians and governments just not interested in acting at all, and a lot of corporations not interested in acting, and a lot of people saying they're not going to act until the corporations act. So it was sort of this constantly growing panic of watching things sort of get crazier and crazier. Um, and back in 2015, I had moved to Toronto for a little while and learned about a climate march. I had never actually heard of climate strikes before. And so I joined it, and it was actually, I think at the time, it was one of Canada's biggest. There were 10,000 people there. It was Jobs, Justice, Climate Action. So that was when I started realizing that you could take more action, that it didn't just have to be an individual thing, which I'd always been kind of doing. And yeah, since then I've done a number of strikes and protests and community-oriented activities. And but I think also my other side to this is that I, in my preteens, I ended up dealing a lot with depression and anxiety, and the woods was my safe place, and that I just sort of wanted to disappear into the forest forever. And then I realized I couldn't, because the forest might not be around in 10 or 20 years. So
Uh,
I couldn't just disappear. I had to fight.
ah, Are there particular organizations that you have been drawn to work with in terms of strikes and educating people?
So the one that I'm involved with a little bit right now, I'm not as involved as the other team members. On Twitter is the Save Congo Rainforest team, and it's a group of activists from all over the world. I believe it was started by Remy Zekinga. I'm not sure I'm saying his name right, and Vanessa Nakate. And it's to raise awareness about the deforestation of the world's second largest rainforest, which doesn't get pretty much any coverage at all.
No.
I do like that organization. They're an amazing team. They're not an organization, they're more grassroots, volunteer led. So that's probably my international, my more globalized organization that I work with, a team that I work with. And locally, I volunteered with a waste watching group to address pollution and plastic waste in particular. So those are kind of the two main ones.
So how do you mean plastic waste from manufacturing sites, or where? Where do you watch?
Just like it's about drawing awareness to our throwaway culture. So their main goal is to educate people on and try and empower people to believe that each individual can make a change, that it's not just corporations that have to do it, that it's all of us, and that like a lot of what they do is they clean up waste, but they also educate people on alternates like reusables that we can use to not have our throwaway culture anymore. And yeah.
So how do you best educate people? What works? Because what I'm hearing in all the progressive activist movements lately is tell stories, tell your story, that's what moves people. But what tactics do you find work in educating people, say, about plastic or the Congo rainforest?
I find a multitude of different things. I don't think it's just one thing. Telling your story is good because it can educate people on what's going on and who's being affected. But I also think direct action is extremely important. So, like, for example, with like the waste watching, we do go out and collect garbage and give presentations about it. And then also, I think addressing city council and addressing people at a governmental level is necessary. Like, you really just need to have a multitude of different methods and utilize all of those. It's not just one thing or another.
What about the Congo rainforest? What are the objectives of that campaign? You're not there helping the rainforest with your hands. How are you making a difference?
So the team comes from pretty much all over the world, from all around Africa to the UK to India to the United States. And I think everybody sort of has a little bit of a different thing they bring to the table. So because a lot of us aren't there and we can't really directly get involved with the government or organizations there, a lot of what we do generally tends to be online and trying to educate others and educate ourselves at the same time about what is happening. And yeah, so it's there's a lot of I think someone's designing a website currently, so a lot of it is technical at the moment.
What would you do if what demands do you have for the Congo rainforest? What would you like to see happen to protect it?
Obviously, like, the goal is to end the deforestation of it, and I think a lot of it is coming from industries. So I think the goal is to try and create these like laws, I guess, to protect it. And yeah.
So it's a focus on getting the government to make policy the Democratic Republic of Congo, is that kind of the focal target?
Yeah, I think that's a lot of it. Yeah.
What have you learned from, I would say, the failures to save the Amazonian rainforest? Are there lessons to be applied?
Oh, elect leader at don't one. um, yeah, that's a very difficult situation because right now in the Amazon you do have somebody who has absolutely zero regard for the people that live there and for the rainforest and for the world abroad and how it's going to affect everyone. So
Bolsonaro is amazing. Did you hear where he said, "Well, everybody dies. It's in our, our fate is all to die. So coronavirus, just like a flu, no biggie." Unbelievable.
I know. It's frightening. It's very frightening.
What steps are you taking to like ban single-use plastic straws or bags or what in where you are?
Um, so we're trying to talk with my city council a lot. Unfortunately, they just signed a deal, a 10-year contract with Coca-Cola, which means that money is involved and they're not very interested in trying to get rid of single-use packaging. So a lot of what, like, it's a team effort and everyone brings their own thing. A lot of what I do is showing people alternatives, like you can bring reusable water bottles, you can bring reusable forks, you can even bring reusable straws. Like those things exist now. So
Yeah, I've seen metal ones and paper ones that are biodegradable.
Yeah. So, and coronavirus made it a bit difficult because a lot of reusables were banned temporarily. Like you can no longer bring reusable mesh bags to buy your vegetables, and you can't like bring your own tote bags for your groceries. And so like it kind of got a little bit skewed for a while.
Right.
So,
in the U.S., the Sunrise Movement, their demand statement is packaged as the Green New Deal to build infrastructure that's green, provide jobs. I wonder if there's a Canadian kind of parallel package of demands.
I don't honestly know. I know that Justin Trudeau has talked about like ending single-use packaging, like bottles. As far as it goes with energy, I'm not seeing a huge initiative right now. I'm not fully aware of everything happening. And then again, coronavirus sort of put the government focus elsewhere. So, yeah. I wish I could give more.
A Canadian who's done a lot for the environmental movement is obviously Naomi Klein, and she points out when there's catastrophes, what does she call it, crisis capitalism or something, that then the evil forces come in where everyone's distracted and have their policies that are environmentally unsound and that kind of thing. So I know that that's happening under Trump for sure. So
yeah,
I think about the coronavirus has been good for the planet in that there's less pollution. You don't have cruise ships and as many airplanes and stuff. So it shows that if anyone doubted that humans impacted the environment, this kind of says, hello, we do.
Yeah. The thing I heard about coronavirus, there were still, like, definitely air pollution went down, like air travel went down, and cars on the road went down. So that was, and like a lot of wildlife was starting to return to regions where they hadn't been in a long time. So that was a really incredible thing to see. But I think the concerns were that once coronavirus was over, production would go into overhaul to try and make up for lost time. So it's like, it's not, like it's just sort of a temporary lull right now, and it's not going to solve the climate crisis, obviously.
George Floyd's death, it's been so interesting that it spawned movements all over the planet for Black Lives Matter. I'm wondering what you're seeing there in terms of, like, it seems the issue is more First Nation, Indigenous people's rights is more of an issue in Canada. I don't know. What are you seeing in terms of the ripples from Black Lives Matter?
There's definitely a lot of systemic racism issues for the Indigenous people here and for Black people. A recent statistic came out saying in Toronto, 20 or Black people were 20 times more likely to be shot by a police officer. So it's definitely something that does happen here, and we can't just pretend it doesn't. But there's also, like, we've had Black Lives Matter marches here, which has been absolutely amazing. I live in a very small town, and there were crowds as far as the eye could see. So it was really kind of incredible. There's definitely a problem with like Indigenous racism, like against the Indigenous people, and RCMP attacking Indigenous people, and a lot of Indigenous people living in areas on boil water advisories. And that is something I would very much like to see addressed more. I don't think at the moment it has. Right now it's more Black Lives Matter. So
The issue that I hear most about for First Nation people is oil pipelines going through their sacred lands and disappearance of young women who are
yes,
disappeared and never found again.
yes, yeah. There's yeah. They had, like, there was a movement for a while trying to get the government to launch an inquiry into it to find out why so many women and girls were disappearing. And they did create this inquiry, but I don't really know what has come of it. It doesn't seem to have, like, it just seems to be more in title than in action. So I don't know.
Do you have Indigenous First Nation people involved in the efforts that you're working with, like the waste, the plastic, single-use plastic?
Yeah, so we have a few, they call them like reservations, and we have a few around our community, and we've contacted them and had them involved with some of our climate strikes. And we've also coordinated waste watching efforts as well. So. And I think that's vitally important to make sure everyone's included, especially Indigenous people.
Right. What I'm hearing lately is, like, if there's a rally in Chico where I live, they'll start with the tribute. This is to Mechoopda land, and we're thankful to Mechoopda people that we're having this gathering in what was originally their land. So they at least acknowledge that it was originally, the land belonged to the Indigenous people.
Yeah.
In terms of the groups that you work with for climate and environment, roughly what percentage are female?
Oh, at least 50. In actually the local one, it's like almost entirely women. So, like, almost entirely. So it's a bit weird, actually, and I'm not sure why. And the Congo team, I think it's probably about 50-50. I don't have the exact statistics.
Well, why do you think it is that globally there are many more young women involved than young men?
I think we're at a time when women are starting to recognize that they have strength to do these things. And I also think society at the same time is recognizing it more. Like, women have definitely done a lot of things throughout history, but unfortunately women's stories get erased a lot, so we don't hear about it as much from the past. And we're in this unique period of time now where people want to hear women's and girls' stories, and they want to include us and make sure that we have more opportunities. And I think also social media to some degree plays a bit of a role in that, because if you're living in an area where you might be the only one who cares about what you care about, you can feel very alone. But then you go online and you see all these women and girls from around the world who are also involved in this, and it's very inspiring. So I've definitely been inspired by a lot of people from across the planet. So
who are some of those people and some of those organizations that you look to for inspiration and information when you're online?
I'm really inspired by Kausara Sani. I'm not sure I'm saying her name right. She's a tree planting, trash cleaning woman in Togo who volunteers with, I think you know her, but she volunteers with street children. So she's absolutely incredible. I'm very inspired by her.
And how did you find out about her in Togo?
Just Twitter, actually. So it's incredible the people that you can network with on there. I wasn't really active on Twitter until last year, and I kind of regret that because there's just so many people on there. So yeah, I'm inspired by Leah Namagerwa I think she's in Uganda, and she does similar things as well, actually, to Kausara. And Lily Platt, I think she's in the Netherlands, but I think she's from the UK, and she's a youth ambassador, and she cleans up. She's very involved in plastic waste, so, and she does a lot of speeches and trash cleans. So,
anybody else, or what about Fridays for Future?
I mean, I think everyone's inspired by Greta. I'm very inspired by the people who are inspired by Greta. I think it's absolutely amazing that so many people are coming together and standing up, and so that's sort of my my inspiration.
Do you think of yourself as a feminist?
I would say so. I mean, it's kind of hard to be a woman and want equality and not be a feminist. Yes, I would consider myself to be.
Yeah, everybody that I've talked to says yes. So
yeah,
and that's a generational change, because it used to be, I'm not a feminist, but I believe in equality.
Yeah. I mean, you still see that a bit now, people who are hesitant to use the term feminism because they associate it with negative things or like anti-masculinity or something, and they don't quite necessarily understand what it actually is. So,
yeah.
There's definitely hesitancy now.
You know who I think really helped is the actress that played in Hermione.
Oh yeah,
what's her name?
Emma Watson.
Emma Watson, because she's spoken out and claimed the feminist label, and I think that really made a difference for young people. They heard her speech to the UN or whatever, and it made it okay. If Emma Watson's a feminist, well, I'm going to think about it.
Yeah, and I remember actually Malala was inspired by her too, and Malala, of course, was always about equal education for girls, but she never identified as a feminist until she met Emma.
Good point. Yeah, good point. So in the second wave of the feminist movement, books were really important. Simone de Beauvoir, The Second Sex, Betty Friedan, The Feminine Mystique, books by Gloria Steinem. But I don't hear in this wave of activism reference to books so much. It's all social media. So my question to you is, are there books that have influenced your thinking, and or do you mostly get inspired and informed on social media?
So like inspired me through feminism particularly, or just in general?
And the climate movement.
I mean, I have read some Naomi Klein books, and I do find her work pretty inspiring. I read a lot of like sciencey stuff that I don't always remember the authors' names, but I do still read quite a bit. And I don't know if like it would be specifically what inspired me about the climate movement. Like, I think the movement right now is definitely happening online, but there's a lot of information you can take from books as well. So,
Mm-hmm. Well, and
um,
I think Rachel Carson's Silent Spring really started off the environmental movement.
yeah,
So, so books like that were at least pivotal in the beginnings. And,
yeah.
and then I think maybe Al Gore's video um, showing that the big jump in human influence on climate change. I think that made a big difference too in the early stages.
Yeah, like you're talking about An Inconvenient Truth?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember, I haven't actually seen that, but I remember when it came out, it was about 2004, and that was the same year I'd heard of climate change. And that was sort of the explosion for me. Like, that's when it was started to be talked about everywhere. And then, of course, Hurricane Katrina happened like right after that. But then that was also, I think, when I became more aware of like the term climate denier and seeing like this lack of change amongst politicians.
Mm-hmm. Um, why do you think it is that Generation Z and Y were uniquely capable to produce really young activists like 9, 11, like Lily in the Netherlands? What is there about Y and Z that enabled people to be so articulate, so powerful, so young?
I mean, I think social media has changed things a lot. I was a kid in the 90s and I didn't grow up with that. So you were kind of on your own if you were interested in that kind of stuff. And if you didn't really know how to take initiative or overcome your own obstacles, it could be very hard to become an activist and become, involved and well known for things like that. And now with Twitter and Instagram and YouTube and a lot of social media, it is something that has definitely given a tool, I guess, to a lot of young people to be able to express themselves and to also be educated by things as well. So
Um,
I think,
you're a kind of a young generation Y, but if the oldest Zs are 25, what do you see any generational differences? Do you see any difference in their approach, X from Y?
yeah, I do. X from Y or Y from Z? Because
Well,
like,
I mean, from the one Z. Sorry.
yeah, yeah. Um, I see, I see similarities and differences. I think a lot of people my age are now starting to like have kids and get married and start families, and some of them aren't thinking as much about what's going on. But then again, I also know a lot of people my age that are starting their own farms and their own homesteads and doing their own versions of activism. Um, so I also like, because I live in this small place, I don't see a lot of my own peers anymore. Like we don't, a lot of them moved to the cities. So I'm not as connected to my own age group as I used to be. um, I do, I do see like a lot more young people getting involved than people my age, and I would like to see more people my age involved.
Why do you think that is, that Z is more active?
Again, I think it's social media and the culture and the movement and everything happening right now. And maybe also like because a lot of Generation Z, they don't have to worry about starting families yet, and they don't have to worry as much about bills. And some of them do, of course, but it's not quite as much. So I don't know. Maybe that plays a role. I'm not sure.
What I've been stricken by, it is both for Y and Z, is how comfortable with diversity they are. I think if I was going to pick one characteristic of Y and Z, it's they don't care your sexual preference, your ethnic background, what pronouns you use. They don't care your skin color. It's they look at people in terms of their individuality, not their appearance. So
Yeah.
that seems to me striking. Anything else that you think sets apart Y and Z?
Um, I mean, I think that pretty much nails it, honestly. It is a very diverse, tolerant group, and that's incredibly beautiful. So,
Yeah, it is. What's scary is that they're not likely to vote as much as old people who aren't as tolerant. And I wonder if that's an issue in Canada.
um, yes, we have like our voting system in general is a bit difficult. It's not voter representational, so a lot of people feel very discouraged by that, disillusioned. And I think that also creates a lot of voter apathy. um, I mean, I've voted every election since I turned 18, so I've definitely always been a voter, but I can't speak for every other young person.
Right. But that's a problem in Canada that older people vote more often than young people. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Um, I'm wondering if having Trudeau, he comes across as being kind of young and vibrant. I wonder if having him as the head of state makes, draws youth in or not.
I don't think it does as much as it used to. I think when he was first elected, people were drawn to the youngness and the vibrancy and the energy.
He's cool.
Um, yeah, and then I think as things proceeded, we kind of saw he's just another politician. So I don't know anymore if he's perceived in that way. And obviously, he's had a few controversies since then. So.
What he did that really impressed me is his cabinet was really diverse. You look at Trump's cabinet; it's mostly old white men, and
Yeah.
Trudeau had women and Sikhs and all these different groups that were involved. So that seemed to me that was fit in with the youth values.
Yeah, he definitely started out very strong. And yeah, I remember he wanted a 50-50 male-female cabinet. And then I remember also at the time, there was, there still is, but the refugee crisis happening in, I think it was Syria and like various regions of the Middle East. Our previous prime minister, he would not allow any refugees to come here. And when Trudeau was elected, he ended up opening up our borders to thousands. So he did start out strong. He hasn't necessarily maintained that.
I thought it was funny. He was asked something about Trump's response to the Black Lives Matter protesters, and it took him 21 seconds to figure out what to say.
Yeah, I don't know if many people know what to make of Trump, honestly.
Well, he's an antisocial narcissist, so to me, he's easy to understand. What I don't understand is why he has something like 41% approval rating. That's what I don't get in the U.S.
Yeah. Well, I suspect there's probably some not entirely as accurately depicted as we think.
You mean in terms of approval, or
like, yeah, I don't want to believe that many people support him, but maybe they do. I don't know. So
we'll see how many people come to his rally in Tulsa, Oklahoma, without masks and social distancing, and in a city with has a sharp rise in COVID. That'll be a little bit of a symptom, I think, of who's crazy enough to do that. An issue in the U.S. for young people is increasing numbers of teens who are anxious and depressed, and it's more girls that are than boys. And I wondered if that's an issue that people are talking about in Canada as well, and if so, why the increase?
It's not talked about nearly enough, I don't think. I think every now and then there'll be like, a Bell Let's Talk Day or something where they try and pretend we're dealing with it, but we're just not. Um, I definitely think we need to increase our awareness and our treatment of mental illnesses. As for why, I just think, I remember when social media started to rise, they were sort of attributing some of it to that. And just, even though you're connected online, you don't always, like many people now, don't have a lot of deep, meaningful relationships person to person. So that it plays a role. And then perhaps just watching the world go crazy and all these events happening, that can really have a toll on your psyche. So
What I see when I talk to teens in the U.S. is they're just under tremendous pressure. You want to get into a good college. You know you're going to have a $35,000 debt probably when you graduate. You probably, a lot of teens are working. They're doing school activities, so it look good in their application for college. They're not getting enough sleep, and then you have media stuff of, oh, this person looks so great and got all those likes and forwards and stuff. So it's just pressure. And
yeah,
does that resonate for you in terms of your observations?
I would say so for sure.
Do you want to talk about your own experiences with anxiety and depression and how you coped with it besides going to nature?
Yeah, I can talk a bit about that, sure. Um, so I developed social anxiety in my preteens, actually, and it got severe enough for me that I had to leave school for a number of years. And I did eventually go back to high school and finished it, but there was a lot of struggle dealing with like trying to find doctors, trying to find the right treatment, trying to find medications and therapies and all sorts of different things. And it just, nothing really worked. And going through that also showed me how inadequate the mental health care system is. Um, it's really like a lot of doctors who specialize in mental health treatment don't even really take it seriously. Oftentimes, they just pretend nothing's happening or dismiss your problems, or they try and kind of put that blame on you, like, oh, you're just thinking negatively, just think positive thoughts and you'll be fine, or whatever. Like, there's a lot of that going on, and then a lot of like underfunded mental health care treatments. And during Corona, actually, like in my town, our mental health ward apparently has been at capacity on and off for the past year or so. There's like a pretty high crisis in my town. And when coronavirus happened, we had nobody hospitalized at all. So we had an open ward for like a lot of beds still for anyone who needed to be hospitalized. And they built like a 30-bed ward in an empty building for corona patients. Meanwhile, the mental health ward was still packed to capacity and they wouldn't address this at all. So they're like, I just think there's not enough focus on trying to help people with that. But anyway, so I went back to school and finished high school, and my 20s, things did get a lot worse for me, and that's why I didn't end up going to university. And I did become a lot more close to the woods and the outdoors, and basically created my entire life around being close to nature and living with very low impact. Um, and then the Fridays for Future movement kind of took off at a time when I was starting to feel a bit better. And so I just it was perfect timing. And I haven't really looked back. I just got very involved in activism. And And that's sort of been a therapy for me in a way.
Yeah, because if you take action, it's empowering. It's
Yeah.
energizing. What allowed you to cope the last years of high school when you returned after a couple of years? How were you able to deal with all those people rushing around the halls and whatever?
I think like it took a while to sort of work up the psychology. Like I had to psych myself up for like a year before I went back. And I took it slow. Like I wasn't always the first semester there. I only had 2 classes. Like I didn't have a full timetable. Um, and I had they call it an IEP, an individual education plan, which allows you to like if you need more time writing tests, for example, they can give you that, or like it just sort of they help you uh, create an education plan that suits your needs. So that helped as well.
Mm-hmm. Have you heard about the energy psychologies where they tap on meridians, like emotional freedom technique?
I don't think so, no.
I'll send you information just because they've had wonderful impact. Like um, they tap on acupressure points on the meridians. They talk and they bring the traumatic event to the consciousness, and then by doing this tapping and talking, they replace it with something positive. So they've used it, for example, on vets who have PTSD, a lot of anxiety,
Huh.
and cleared it. So what I like about it is that once you learn it, you can do it yourself.
Hmm.
It doesn't. You don't have to have a therapist to go through the process.
Okay, yeah, interesting.
Yeah, it really is. Any other thoughts about why, at least in the U.S., girls are more likely to say they're anxious and depressed than boys?
Um, I can't give you like actual like statistical facts, but I do remember hearing once that girls do tend to be impacted by anxiety and depression at a higher level and more frequently than boys are. And it happens often earlier for girls. I think girls sometimes go through puberty at an earlier age. That, so there might be a biological aspect to it as well.
Ah, interesting.
Uh, I, I mean, I don't know if America is, or many places, honestly, are the best places for girls and women to live and feel safe and included. So there's also a cultural aspect to that.
Do you think that people feel safer on Canadian streets, just walking down the street, than in U.S. streets?
Um, I mean, I do personally. I can't speak for anybody else. I've been to the States a few times, and I'm always thinking I'm going to get shot.
Oh dear.
So, um, I mean, we do have violence here. It's not like it doesn't exist. I just don't think it's at the extreme levels that we see south of the border.
Yeah.
But I'm also white, so I can't speak for any person of indigenous heritage or any black person or anything. I don't really know how anyone else feels.
Um, when you think ahead, are you optimistic or pessimistic that we'll turn around the climate crisis?
I'm both. um, I think my natural state is to be pessimistic, and it can be like so easy to just become so overwhelmed at how much worse things are constantly getting, and it just seems to increase and increase and increase and increase, and it doesn't seem to stop. So that to me is terrifying. But being pessimistic can be crippling. So I try to be optimistic, and I just try and like focus on the good and say there are people fighting for this, and there are people who are aware of it. And so, yeah, I'm both.
If you were giving advice to someone who was starting out to be an activist, based on what you've learned, what would you say to them? Make sure you do blah, blah, and blah. Don't do blah, blah.
Um, I would say try and do something you love. I mean, you can't always do that because there's a lot of bad things going on, but try and focus on, like, there's so many different aspects of activism, and you might not be able to do everything. You might not be able to feed the hungry, for example, but maybe you can plant a farm or vice versa, maybe. So try and focus on something you love, if you can, if you have that option to. And I think laugh at the trolls. There's a lot of trolls out there who want to keep you down, and it's kind of ridiculous, honestly. And it can be easy to take it all to heart, but you have to laugh at it.
And you personally have experienced trolls on your social media accounts?
A little bit. I've been lucky so far. I've only had minor issues with that, and generally I just kind of laugh because it is funny. So
what can be their argument? I mean, what do they have a point, or is it just shut up?
A lot of times they don't even have a point. They just sort of mock what you're saying, and they don't even have like a good comeback for it. So
so it's just like a game they play. How contradictory can I be? And it's just kind of a game and not out of principle or something.
Yeah, I mean, there are some people who will try and use logic to tell you what's what, but a lot of it is just like, yeah, people who are just trying to be trolls.
Mm.
So,
just let's finish up with agriculture, because that's an interest of yours. We know that organic farming sequesters carbon, and if everybody organic farmed, it would be a big solution for global warming and climate change. What are you seeing happen in terms of the movement for organic farming and against factory farming and, Roundup and GMO seeds and all of that stuff?
I mean, when I first started learning about organic farming maybe 10, 12 years ago, there seemed to be more of it happening then. It was more in discussion then anyway. And it did seem that there were more people my age starting to get involved, and I don't see that as much anymore. So I don't know if it's taken a lull or if it's just because like the general conversation of our culture has changed. But as far as it goes with like Roundup and GMO and Monsanto and Syngenta, there have actually been some victories over them. So people that have won lawsuits, and so it's sort of a push and shove. There's like some things are changing and then some things are regressing. So no.
Or maybe it's just that more organic gardening is more popular. I mean, people want to buy organic food in Whole Earth, or these big markets that pride themselves on being organic. So maybe they're not talking about it as much because it's accepted as, oh yeah, you want organic veggies.
Maybe, yeah. I don't know. I think like in a lot of places there are like bylaws against having like food gardens in your front yard. And luckily here it's not like that, but I think sometimes there are laws and bylaws that prevent these things from happening as well. So yeah, it's really hard to say. I mean, I know since the corona stuff started, like all of the veggie seeds have been sold out at the grocery store. Like I can't find anything anymore. So
yeah, people are buying baby chicks and seeds and making bread and
yeah, the flour and yeast are sold out.
So are you able to have a garden where you live?
I have a small one. I'm mostly growing trees right now. I did plant a few pumpkins and watermelons and tomatoes.
What do you mean you're growing trees? That sounds interesting.
So I find trees from seed. Like I find the seeds in either the fall and then keep them in the fridge over the winter, which is part of the process. Or I collect them in the spring and yeah, I grow trees from seed. And sometimes I I rescue trees as well. So
You mean like pine trees or that grow naturally in the environment?
so yeah, like I'm very into native trees, like trees that are native to my region. So I have a lot of sugar maples and eastern white cedars and a couple beech trees, for example. A butternut tree, which is very rare, so I was excited about that.
And then where do you plant them?
Right now, I have a few friends who like have property out in the countryside, so I've been planting those out there. But right now, my current project is there's like a little gully behind my house and like a road on the other side of it. And a few years ago, our city did some construction and they cut down a lot of the forest there. So I have trees that are growing all over my yard that we can't really keep them because they're growing in flower pots or places where they're not going to get to grow up. So I've been transplanting them there to try and heal the forest.
How
Put them back.
wonderful. What else do you do personally that to help the environment besides cloth bags in markets and
So I don't own a car. I bike everywhere. I'm absolutely nuts about biking. I've just started to kind of bike between towns. I'm not very good at that yet, but I haul everything on my bicycle, and, big groceries and pumpkins and sewing machines. Um, uh, and I bike year round, even in the winter. And I shop pretty much 100% thrift. Like I don't really like to buy new stuff. If I need anything new, I usually try and make it from salvaged items. I'm like they call that upcycling, I guess. I like to take old items and turn them into new. So I make clothing and alter clothing. And, um, yeah, so
the only new clothes I buy are underwear. Everything else is
yeah,
thrift stores.
yeah, yeah. New clothes, underwear, socks, hiking boots because my feet are weird. But I'm trying to learn how to sew underwear out of old t-shirts. So, so
Oh my goodness.
I don't know if I can do it yet, but
Well, I'm sure you can. There must be a pattern.
yeah, probably. So,
Okay. Well, anything else that you'd like to add that we haven't mentioned that we should about young women, generations Y and Z, activism?
I think don't let age hold you back. Don't if you think you're too young or if you think you're too old, don't let that hold you back. You're never too young or too old. Because I think right now there's like a big focus on a very specific age group and only they can do something, but then you also have a lot of people trying to tell you, oh, you're too young, you don't count. And I think that's just all foolishness. Like you're never too young to matter, you're never too old to matter. So don't let age hold you back.
So it's like a trend or like a little bleep in the popular attention that says, oh, we've got to pay attention to Z.
Yeah. And yeah, for sure. And I think like I hear like people like kids who are, very young, a lot of them I think feel they're not heard because they're young as well. So I think it works both ways. People who are older maybe don't feel heard as well. So
Right. Thank you.